My name is Natalie, and 3 days ago, I walked into the house I had spent 2 years restoring by hand, only to find my sister, Alexandria, standing in my kitchen holding a glass of champagne. She was not alone. A camera crew was setting up lighting in my living room, moving the furniture I had carefully sourced from estate sales, adjusting the angles to capture the mid-century architecture I had brought back to life. I stood in the doorway, covered in the fine dust of a job site I had just left, holding a box of vintage tile I had driven 4 hours to collect. Alexandria looked up, saw me, and didn't even blink. She looked directly into the camera lens and smiled that practiced, perfect smile she used for her 2 million followers. "Welcome back to my channel, guys," she said, her voice smooth and bright. "Today, I am finally revealing the project I have been working on for months. Welcome to the sanctuary, the venue for my new wellness retreat." She gestured wide, encompassing my living room, my kitchen, my life, claiming it all as her own. She ignored me completely, treating me like a contractor who had wandered into the shop by mistake. The violation was absolute. It wasn't just trespassing. It was erasure. Before I tell you what I did next, I have to ask, if you walked into your own home and found your siblings selling tickets to tour it, what would be your very first reaction? Drop a comment below. I didn't scream. I didn't storm into the frame and knock the camera over. I froze. My mind couldn't process the image in front of me. My parents, Thomas and Stacy, were sitting on the patio, sipping iced tea and watching the production with proud smiles. They saw me standing there, saw the shock on my face, and their expressions didn't change. My mother just put a finger to her lips, signaling me to be quiet because they were filming. My hand started to shake, but not from fear. It was a specific kind of adrenaline I recognized from years of being the invisible machinery that kept this family running. I looked down at my knuckles. They were raw and bleeding slightly from sanding the original hardwood floors at 2 a.m. just 3 days ago. I had spent every weekend for 2 years on this house. I had stripped layers of lead paint, rewired the electrical system myself to save money, and slept on a mattress on the subfloor while I saved up for drywall. This house was my sweat equity. It was the physical proof that I existed, that I could build something beautiful without their help. And now, Alexandria was standing there with her pristine manicure, holding a glass of expensive champagne, selling my labor as her vision. "Cut," the director yelled. Alexandria relaxed her pose, took a sip of her drink, and finally looked at me. "Oh, good, you're here," she said, as if I were the caterer. "Can you move that box of tile? It's ruining the aesthetic of the entryway." I walked into the room, my boots leaving faint dust prints on the floor I had polished by hand. "What are you doing, Alexandria?" I asked, my voice low. She sighed, clearly annoyed that I was interrupting her flow. "I told you I'm launching the retreat this weekend. The pre-sale tickets sold out in 10 minutes, Nat. People are obsessed with the vibe here. It's perfect for the brand." "This is my house," I said. "I bought it. I restored it. You don't live here." My mother walked in from the patio, her heels clicking on the floor. "Natalie, don't start this now," she said, her tone dismissive. "Alexandria needs this. Her last venture didn't go well, and she has investors watching this launch. Just let her have the weekend. You can stay in the guest pod in the backyard. It's perfectly comfortable." The guest pod. My own mother was relegating me to the shed in my own backyard so my sister could play pretend in my home. I felt a familiar sensation then, a heavy, suffocating weight settling in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was the trap of normalized cruelty. You see, when you grow up in a house where your boundaries are treated as suggestions, violation starts to feel like gravity. It feels inevitable. You learn early on that fighting back only makes you the villain. You learn that your role is to absorb the impact, to smooth the edges, to be the resource the golden child consumes. For 29 years, I had been the fixer. The one who did the homework, the one who drove the designated driver car, the one who loaned money that never got paid back. They didn't see this as theft. They saw it as the natural order of things. Alexandria shone, and I supported. That was the script. "She already sold the tickets, Natalie," my father added, coming in behind Mom. We can't cancel now. It would ruin her reputation. Just be a team player for once. A team player. The phrase echoed in my head. I looked at Alexandria, checking her makeup in the reflection of the vintage mirror I had spent weeks restoring. She wasn't worried. She wasn't even looking at me. She knew, with the absolute certainty of someone who has never been told no, that I would fold. I would clean up my dust, move my boxes, and disappear into the background like I always did.
But she missed something.
She didn't see the blood on my knuckles. She didn't know that the person who builds the house knows exactly how to take it apart. Okay, I said quietly. I won't make a scene. My mother exhaled, relieved. Good girl. Now, why don't you help move those ugly boxes out of the shot? We have a lot to do before the guests arrive on Sunday. I picked up the box of tile. I'll take care of it, I said. I walked out the front door, past the camera crew, past my parents, and down the driveway. I didn't go to the guest pod. I got in my truck, turned the ignition, and drove away. I didn't cry. I just drove, my mind clearing with every mile. They thought my silence was submission. They were about to find out it was strategy. I wasn't leaving to hide. I was leaving to get the one thing they didn't think I had.
The deed.
I sat in my truck 2 blocks away, the engine idling, the air conditioning blasting against the sweat drying on my forehead. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Alexandria had posted the video. The Sanctuary, a sneak peek. I watched it on my dashboard mount. The editing was slick, the music ethereal. There was Alexandria, spinning in my living room, her voiceover talking about manifesting the space and creating a haven for healing. In the background, for a split second, you could see me hauling that box of tile, blurred out, just a nameless worker in her grand design. The caption read, "So proud to finally share my home with you all. Tickets for the weekend retreat are live." She hadn't just invaded my home. She was actively erasing me from it. She was selling tickets to a lie. My mother texted me a moment later. "We're heading to dinner at the Ivy to celebrate. Don't wait up. Just make sure the guest pod is tidy." They were gone. I didn't reply. Grief is a waste of energy when you're planning a demolition. I checked my watch. It was 7:15 in the evening. I had maybe 2 hours. I put the truck in gear and drove back to the house. The driveway was empty. The camera crew had packed up, leaving trampled grass and cigarette butts on the lawn I had reseeded by hand. I walked to the front door, inserted my key, the key Lena had copied without asking, and stepped inside. The house smelled wrong. It smelled of expensive perfume and sage, a cloying, artificial scent masking the clean smell of old wood and plaster. My furniture had been rearranged to create conversation pits. A massive banner with Alexandria's branding hung over the fireplace I had restored brick by brick. Yoga mats were rolled in the corner like artillery shells. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a stage set. I didn't waste time being angry. Anger is messy. Construction is precise. Deconstruction is even more precise. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for a 24-hour emergency locksmith I had used on job sites. "I need a rekey," I said.
Tonight.
"All exterior doors. Emergency rates apply?" "Fine." Then I called a hauling crew I worked with regularly. "Mike, it's Natalie. I have a job. Immediate loadout. No, not debris. Furniture. Staging props. It needs to be gone in an hour. Yes, I'll pay double." They arrived 20 minutes later. The locksmith started on the front door. I stood in the living room and directed the movers. "That banner," I said, pointing.
Gone.
"Those rented statues."
Gone.
"The mats." "The cases of wellness water." "All of it." They moved with the efficiency of a pit crew. They stripped the room of every trace of Alexandria. The velvet ropes she'd put up to block off the VIP area?
Gone.
The massive portrait of herself she'd hung in the hallway?
Gone.
We moved it all to the curb, stacking it neatly, impersonally, like trash on collection day. I didn't break a single thing. I didn't slash the banner or shatter the champagne glasses she'd left in the sink. That would have been emotional. This was architectural. I was simply restoring the structural integrity of my life. While the movers worked, I walked through the house with a trash bag. I collected the smaller things. Her lipstick on the bathroom counter. Her charger plugged into my wall. The itinerary for the retreat she'd left on the kitchen island. I swept them into the bag with the same detachment I used to sweep sawdust. By 8:45 at night, the house was empty of her. The perfume was fading. The locksmith handed me a new set of keys. They were heavy, cold, and beautiful. "You're all set," he said. "Deadbolts are reinforced. Nobody's getting in without these." I paid him in cash. I paid the movers. I watched the taillights of the truck disappear down the street, leaving a pile of Alexandria's brand sitting on the asphalt under the street lamp. I walked back inside. I locked the new deadbolt. The click echoed through the empty house, a sound so sharp and final it felt like a gavel coming down. I turned off all the lights. I didn't want them to see me waiting. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat in the dark at the table I had refinished. The silence settled around me, heavy and protective. I checked my watch. 9:03. They would be finishing dessert right about now. They would be toasting to Alexandria's success, to the tickets sold, to the stability they had so graciously arranged for her at my expense. They would be laughing, comfortable in the certainty that I was in the backyard pod, behaving myself, staying quiet, playing my part. They had no idea that the locks had changed. They had no idea that their keys were now just useless pieces of metal. I took a sip of water and waited for the headlights. The headlights swept across the living room wall like searchlights, cutting through the darkness I had wrapped around myself. I heard the car doors slam, then the crunch of heels on the gravel driveway. They were laughing. It was the loud, performative laughter of people who believe they have already won. "I'm telling you, the engagement on that reel is insane," Alexandria was saying, her voice carrying through the single-pane glass of the front door. "We need to do a sunrise yoga stream tomorrow. Dad, you need to move the truck before then. It ruins the feng shui." "Whatever you want, honey," my father replied. His voice was warm, indulgent, a tone he never used with me. I sat perfectly still at the kitchen table. My hand tightened around my glass of water. I heard the heavy metallic scratch of a key sliding into the deadbolt. It stopped halfway. The new mechanism was a different brand, a different shape. "That's weird," Alexandria muttered. She pulled it out and shoved it back in.
Scratch.
"Stop. It's sticking. Dad, the lock is jammed." "Let me try," my father said. There was a jiggle, a grunt of exertion, and then a rattle. "It's not jammed," my father said, his voice dropping an octave. "It's the wrong key." "Don't be stupid. It's the key I took this morning," Alexandria snapped. Natalie probably just locked the top bolt. She started pounding. Not a polite knock. A demand. "Natalie, open up. The key isn't working." I stood up. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked silently to the hallway, staying in the shadows. I could see their silhouettes distorted through the frosted glass panel of the door. They looked like ghosts trying to break back into the living world. "Natalie," my mother's voice joined in. "We know you're in there. We saw your truck. Stop playing games." I walked right up to the door. I was close enough to hear Alexandria's sharp intake of breath on the other side. "The key doesn't work," I said, my voice calm and loud enough to be heard through the wood, "because I changed the locks." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the vacuum before an explosion. "You did what?" Alexandria shrieked. The Namaste persona, the healing vibes she curated for her followers, it all evaporated instantly. "Open this door right now. My yoga mats are in there. My cameras." "Your mats are on the curb," I said, "along with your statues and your banners. I hired movers. The house is empty. You touch my stuff?" She slammed her hand against the wood. "You little psycho. Open the door. I have investors coming at 8 in the morning." "That sounds like a problem for you," I said. "You don't live here. You never lived here. Go home." I turned to walk away, intending to go back to the kitchen, to let them scream themselves hoarse until the neighbors called the police. But then I heard the metallic clank of the mail slot snapping open. "I wouldn't walk away if I were you, Natalie." Alexandria yelled through the slot. Her eyes were visible for a split second, wild and furious. You think you're smart? You think you can just kick me out?
I didn't kick you out, I said.
I stopped you from breaking in. I have rights, she screamed. I established tenancy. I knew you'd pull something like this, you jealous bitch. I mailed myself a certified letter to this address 3 weeks ago. It's sitting in your mailbox right now. I froze. A certified letter? That proves residency, she yelled, her voice echoing in the empty hallway. In California, that makes me a tenant. If you lock me out, that's an illegal eviction. I will call the cops, Natalie. I will have you arrested for locking me out of my own home. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew construction law, I knew zoning, but I didn't know tenancy law. Could she really do that? Could a piece of mail override a deed? She's right, Natalie, my father said, his voice coming through the door, heavy with disappointment. Open the door. Don't make us call the police. We don't want you to have a record. We'll testify, my mother added, and this was the knife that twisted in the wound. If the police come, we'll tell them she's been living here for a month. We'll tell them you agreed to it. Don't force us to do that, Natalie. Just open the door and apologize, and we can fix this. They were willing to lie to the police. They were willing to frame me for an illegal eviction just to save Alexandria's launch party. I looked at the door. It was a solid piece of oak I had refinished myself. It felt sturdy, but suddenly, the lock didn't feel like enough. If they called the police and lied, if they had proof, you have 5 minutes. Alexandria shouted. 5 minutes to open this door, or I'm dialing 911. I backed away from the door. My hands were shaking again. The clarity I had felt an hour ago was fracturing. I needed help. I needed someone who understood the language of sharks. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed my phone. My fingers fumbled as I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. Catherine Legal. She was a senior partner at the architectural firm where I worked. She was terrifying, brilliant, and owed me a favor for saving a permit application last month. I hit dial. It was 9:20 at night on a Saturday. Natalie. Her voice was crisp. This better be a structural emergency. It is, I whispered, staring at the front door as the pounding started again. My sister is trying to squat in my house. She says she has a certified letter. She says she's calling the cops. Catherine didn't ask why. She didn't ask for the backstory. She just asked one question. Did she send the letter, or did she sign a lease? Just a letter, I said. But my parents, they said they'd lie. They said they'd tell the police she lives here. Okay, Catherine said. Listen to me carefully. Do not open that door. Do not say another word to them. I'm logging into the county recorder's office and the permit database. Send me a picture of whatever she claims she has. If she's claiming residency to investors, she didn't just mail a letter, Natalie. Grifters always leave a paper trail. What do you mean? I mean, Catherine said, her voice turning cold, if she sold tickets to an event at a venue she doesn't own, she had to show the sponsors something to get the insurance. Send me the link to her event page.
Now.
I hung up and pulled up Alexandria's Instagram. I clicked the link in her bio. The Sanctuary Retreat, sponsored by Lumina Water and Terra Yoga. I scrolled down to the venue section. There was a link for vendor insurance and liability.
It was a PDF.
I clicked it. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a letter. It was a document. A lease agreement. Signed by Alexandria. And signed by me. But I had never signed it. I stared at the screen, the blue light illuminating the dark kitchen. She hadn't just bluffed. She had forged my signature on a legal contract to get $50,000 in sponsorship money. The fear evaporated. It was replaced by something much, much colder. She didn't just break in. I whispered to the empty room. She committed federal fraud. I forwarded the document to Catherine. Outside, the siren started to wail. Alexandria had called the police. Good. I wanted witnesses. Sunday morning arrived with a cruel, brilliant sunshine that illuminated everything I had been hiding in the dark. I hadn't slept, but I wasn't tired. I was vibrating with a cold, crystalline focus. I stood by the living room window, sipping black coffee, watching the street fill up with Range Rovers and Teslas. The wellness community had arrived. Women in designer yoga gear were unrolling mats on my front lawn, confused about why the venue was locked. A catering van was trying to park in the driveway, blocked by my father's truck. And there was Alexandria. She looked like a woman holding onto sanity by a thread. Her hair was messy, her makeup applied in a rush without a mirror. She was flitting between the guests and the two police officers who had finally arrived, speaking rapidly, gesturing wildly at my house. I could see her customer service, mask slipping, revealing the panic underneath. She was telling them a story where she was the victim, the tenant, the rightful queen of this castle locked out by a jealous sister. My parents were there too, standing by the officers, nodding earnestly. They were doing exactly what they promised. They were lying for her. I put my coffee cup down on the coaster. I picked up the folder containing the deed, the property tax records, and the printout of the forged lease Catherine had helped me secure. It was time. I unlocked the deadbolt. The sound was heavy and final. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The silence that fell over the lawn was instant. 50 faces turned toward me. Alexandria stopped mid-sentence, her arm frozen in the air. "Ma'am," one of the officers asked, stepping forward. He looked tired. "Are you Natalie?" "I am," I said. "I'm the owner of this property." "She's lying." Alexandria shrieked. The mask was gone now. Her voice cracked, shrill and desperate. "I live here. I have a lease. She locked me out illegally." The officer looked at me. "Ma'am, we have a statement here from your parents saying your sister has resided here for 30 days. If that's true, you can't just lock her out. You need to go through the courts." My father stepped forward, refusing to meet my eyes. "It's true, officer." Natalie agreed to this. She's having an episode." An episode? They were using my mental health to justify their theft. "I understand," I said calmly. I walked down the porch steps, ignoring Alexandria, ignoring my parents, walking straight to the officer. "I'm sure they told you that, but I think you should see this." I handed him the folder. "That is the deed, recorded in my name only. That is the time-stamped receipt from the locksmith last night. And this," I pointed to the printout, "is the document my sister submitted to her sponsors to secure $50,000 in funding for this event." The officer looked at the paper. "It's a lease agreement," he said. "Yes," I said, "with my signature on it. Except I never signed it. My sister forged my signature to commit wire fraud." I turned to look at the woman standing near the catering van. She was wearing a lanyard that said Lumina Water, sponsor. She was listening intently. "You might want to check your contracts," I said to her, my voice carrying clearly across the lawn. Because the venue didn't exist. The sponsor's face went pale. She pulled out her phone immediately. The officer looked from the paper to Alexandria. "Ma'am, did you sign this?" And this is where it happened. This is where the fracture occurred. There is a concept in psychology called a narcissistic injury. It's what happens when a person who has built their entire reality around their own entitlement suddenly hits a wall they cannot manipulate. It isn't just anger. It is a complete psychological collapse. When the world stops mirroring their fantasy back to them, they don't reflect, they shatter. Alexandria didn't try to explain. She didn't try to lie her way out of it. She looked at the officer, then at the sponsors who were now whispering and backing away, and then at me. And she broke. "It's mine," she screamed, a sound so raw and primal it made the guests flinch. She lunged at me. "It's mine. I need this. You ruin everything. You jealous little nothing. You ruin everything." She didn't look like a wellness guru. She looked like a feral animal caught in a trap. She tried to claw past the officer to get to me, to get to the house, to get to the reality she felt entitled to. The officer grabbed her arm. "Ma'am, step back."
"No."
"Make her open the door. It's my turn. It's supposed to be my turn." She was sobbing now, ugly, heaving sobs, screaming about fairness and how hard she tried, and how I was stealing her life. It was the tantrum of a child who had never been told no, amplified by the desperation of an adult who knew she was drowning. My mother tried to rush forward. "Don't touch her. She's upset. Natalie, tell them to stop. Tell them you lied." I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had taught me to be small so her golden child could be big. "I didn't lie," I said. The sponsor walked up to the officer. "Officer? If that lease is forged, we need to file a report. That money was wired yesterday." The officer nodded. He turned Alexandria around and handcuffed her. Not for squatting. For the assault she just attempted and the fraud she had just been accused of. "You have the right to remain silent," he began. Alexandria was screaming my name as they put her in the back of the cruiser. My father was yelling at the officer. My mother was weeping, looking at me with a hatred so pure it felt like a physical blow. "You did this," she shouted at me. "You sent your sister to jail. Over a house. Are you happy now?" I stood on my lawn, surrounded by the wreckage of their reputation. I looked at the house I had sanded and painted and loved. I looked at the sister, who would have sold me out for a hashtag. "I'm not happy," I said. "I'm safe." And for the first time in my life, that was enough. The silence took about a week to feel normal. After the sirens, the screaming, and the spectacle on my front lawn, the sudden quiet felt heavy, like the air pressure drop before a storm. But it wasn't a storm coming. It was the dust finally settling. The legal fallout was swift and brutal. The sponsors didn't just walk away. They sued for breach of contract and damages. The fraud charges against Alexandria stuck. It turns out, forging a signature on a contract involving $50,000 isn't a misunderstanding or a family squabble. It's a federal crime. My parents did exactly what I expected them to do. They drained their retirement accounts to hire her a defense attorney. They mortgaged their own future to try and buy her out of the consequences of her actions. They sent me long, venomous texts calling me a traitor, a destroyer of families, a heartless daughter who cared more about a pile of bricks than her own flesh and blood. I didn't read past the first few lines. I didn't respond. I simply blocked their numbers. Then I blocked their emails. Then I blocked their social media accounts. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of hygiene. I was cleaning the toxicity out of my life the same way I had cleaned the mold out of the drywall. I spent the next month finishing the house. I finally hung my own art. I unpacked my books. I put the rug exactly where I wanted it, not where it looked best for a camera angle. One evening, about 6 weeks after the arrest, I was sitting on my floor, sanding a vintage coffee table I had found at a flea market. The sun was setting, casting those long, golden shadows across the room, the same light Alexandria had tried to sell as her own. I stopped sanding and just listened. I heard the hum of the refrigerator.
I heard a car pass by outside.
I heard my own breathing. For 29 years, I had been afraid of this silence. I had been trained to believe that if I wasn't being useful, if I wasn't fixing a problem or absorbing a crisis, I didn't exist. I thought silence meant abandonment. But sitting there, covered in dust, in a house that was legally, physically, and spiritually mine, I realized it wasn't abandonment. It was peace. There is a profound truth I learned in that moment, something I call the power of the closed door. We are conditioned to believe that family means an open-door policy. We are taught that love means access, unlimited, unconditional access to our time, our resources, and our inner lives. We are told that closing the door on family is an act of war, a declaration of hate. But that is a lie designed to protect the takers. A door isn't just a barrier, it's a filter. It is the mechanism that allows us to decide what comes in and what stays out. When you lock a door, you aren't just locking the world out. You are locking your peace in. You are creating a container where your nervous system can finally rest, where your reality isn't constantly being rewritten by someone else's demands. I used to think that boundaries were walls I built to keep people away because I was cold or unloving. Now I know that boundaries are the structure that keeps the roof from collapsing. Without them, you aren't a home. You're just a public space for other people to trample through. I stood up and walked to the front door. It was the same solid oak door Alexandria had pounded on. I placed my hand on the deadbolt I had installed. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt a quiet, unshakable sense of sovereignty. My sister was facing a judge. My parents were facing financial ruin. They were living in the wreckage of their own entitlement. I was not responsible for saving them. I was not responsible for being their shock absorber anymore. I turned the lock.
Click.
The sound was small, mechanical, and perfect. It was the sound of a life that finally belonged to the person living it. I walked back to my kitchen, made a cup of tea, and watched the sun go down on my own terms. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was free.